Okay, this is the final video for chapter 9. So in the last video, we learned about Booker T. Washington and how he was basically kissing ass to the white people, trying to get black people to simmer down and to accept the fact that they were getting treated like shit. Yes, a black man telling black people to calm down and to accept their mistreatment. Booker T. Washington was invited by white organizers of the Cotton States and International Exposition in Atlanta in 1895 to speak. Washington urged the Southern Negro to cast down your bucket where you are, that is, to stay in the South and to be farmers, mechanics, domestics, perhaps even to attain to the professions. He urged white employers to hire Negroes rather than immigrants of strange tongue and habits. Negroes without strikes and labor wars were the most patient, faithful, law-abiding, and unresentful people that the world has seen, he said. Though understand that the agitation of questions of social equality is the extremist folly. You know who that reminds me of? That reminds me of that black man that was working under Trump. That was the surgeon. Ben, was it? I don't even remember his name. That's how badly I don't want to know that man. But that's who he reminds me of. That was exactly this energy. Perhaps Washington saw this as a necessary tactic of survival in the time of hangings and burnings of Negroes throughout the South. It was a low point for black people in America. Thomas Fortune, a young black editor of the New York Globe, testified before a Senate committee in 1883 about the situation of the Negro in the United States. He spoke of widespread poverty, of government betrayal, of desperate Negro attempts to educate themselves. The average wage of Negro farm laborers in the South was about 50 cents a day, Fortune said. He was usually paid in orders, not money, which he could only use at a store controlled by the planter, a system of fraud. The Negro farmer, to get the wherewithal to plant his crop, had to promise it to the store, and when everything was added up at the end of the year, he was in debt. So his crop was constantly owed to someone, and he was tied to the land, with the records kept by the planter and storekeeper so that the Negroes are swindled and kept forever in debt. Fortune spoke of the penitentiary system of the South, with its infamous chain gang, the object being to terrorize the blacks and furnish victims for contractors who purchased the labor of these wretches from the state for a song. The white man who shoots a Negro always goes free, while the Negro steals a hog is sent to the chain gang for 10 years. Many Negroes fled. About 6,000 black people left Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi and migrated to Kansas to escape violence and poverty. Frederick Douglass and some other leaders thought this was a wrong tactic, but migrants rejected such advice. We have found no leader to trust but God overhead of us, one said. Henry Adams, another black migrant, illiterate, a veteran of the Union Army, told the Senate committee in 1880 why he left Shreveport, Louisiana. We seed that the whole South, every state in the South, had got into the hands of the very men that held us slaves. Even in the worst periods, Southern Negroes continued to meet, to organize in self-defense. Herbert Aptheker reprints 13 documents of meetings, petitions, and appeals of Negroes in the 1880s in Baltimore, Louisiana, the Carolinas, Virginia, Georgia, Florida, Texas, Kansas, showing the spirit of defiance and resistance of blacks all over the South. This in the face of over 100 lynchings a year by this time. Despite the apparent hopelessness of the situation, there were black leaders who thought Booker T. Washington wrong in advocating caution and moderation. W.E.B. Du Bois saw the late 19th century betrayal of the Negro as part of a larger happening in the United States, something happening not only to poor blacks, but to poor whites. In his book, Black Reconstruction, written in 1935, he said, "God wept, but that mattered little to an unbelieving age. What mattered most was that the world wept and is still weeping and blind with tears and blood. For there began to rise in America in 1876 a new capitalism and a new enslavement of labor." He continued, "Home labor in cultured lands, appeased and misled by a ballot whose power the dictatorship of vast capital strictly curtailed, was bribed by high wage and political office to unite in an exploitation of white, yellow, brown, and black labor in lesser lands." Was Du Bois right? That in the growth of American capitalism before and after the Civil War, whites as well as blacks were in some sense becoming slaves? that is the end of chapter 9. What did y'all think? That was a very heavy chapter, as are all of these chapters. I was under the impression that chapter 10 was about the Civil War because it settled the other Civil War, which I should have understood was not the Civil War. So I'm not sure what chapter 10 is about, but it is 30 pages. So I'm going to get into it. I'm going to start reading it and we'll see what it's about. I'm going to do several parts for it. And yeah, we'll continue on with the book and see where this goes. I don't know what to expect anymore, to be completely honest with you, but that's what this is all about. This is all a process of uncovering, of learning, and expanding our minds to better understand what is happening today. Thank you all for being here. I will talk to you soon, and take care of yourselves. Oh, and free Palestine.